Hey everyone! Tonight we step beyond the shining monuments and grand histories of ancient cities to uncover something hidden, how people really dealt with trash, waste, and all the unseen filth that built up behind the walls. While we marvel at their temples and art, it's the messy reality underfoot that shaped daily life in surprising ways. Before you settle in, please like and subscribe if you truly enjoy these deep dives into forgotten details, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe put on a bit of background noise, and let's quietly slip into the murky side of ancient urban survival together. The midnight carts that hauled refuse far beyond city walls. Imagine yourself wandering the empty streets of a medieval city just after midnight. The familiar bustle of the day has faded, replaced by an uneasy stillness. The lamps are low, casting long shadows across cobbled lanes and stone buildings whose outlines blur beneath the heavy cloak of darkness. The only sounds are the distant slosh of water in the gutters and the soft rustle of something unseen in an alley. It is here, in this deep quiet, that the midnight carts begin their silent journey. Most of the city's inhabitants are asleep, bundled beneath rough woolen blankets, the dreams of bakers and butchers, merchants and mothers, rising and falling in their small rooms. But in certain corners, a handful of men and women move quietly through the gloom, pulling shawls tighter around their shoulders, their faces set with the resolve of a familiar but thankless task. These are the refuse collectors, known by many names: night soil men, rakers, or simply the cart drivers, whose work is as old as the city itself and as vital as any carried out by day. Their carts are simple things: wooden frames, sturdy wheels, iron-rimmed and often mended many times over. In the back, barrels or large baskets overflow with the unwanted, the sweepings of the marketplace, broken pottery, rotting vegetables, ashes, and sometimes, the contents of privies and chamber pots. The air is thick with the sharp tang of refuse, but beneath that, the earthy scent of wood, wet straw, and old leather. The horses move slowly, hooves muffled by the thick layer of filth and hay beneath their load. For most people, the work of these cart drivers is best left unspoken. The city depends on their labor, but shuns their company. To touch what others discard is to be marked by it, set apart from the cleaner trades and sometimes even from the very streets they keep clear. Children whisper stories about the midnight carts, imagining what secrets they might hide, what treasures, or curses, could be buried among the city's cast-offs. For the drivers, however, the work is simply work, a rhythm as regular as the toll of the distant cathedral bell. The routes they follow are both routine and filled with small risks. Each evening, after the city gates have been closed to travelers and watchmen have taken their posts, the refuse collectors begin. The city's walls, once built to keep out danger, now serve as a boundary to be crossed. The carts roll through quiet lanes, the drivers pausing at appointed houses or inns where buckets wait at back doors. Sometimes, a wary resident slips a few extra coins to have their refuse hauled away without a word, especially if it carries the scent of illness or shame. With each stop, the load grows heavier. The work must be done quickly, for though the law allows these midnight journeys, few wish to witness them. The drivers work by lantern light, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats or rough scarves. They know which stones to avoid, where the road dips, and which watchmen are willing to look the other way. Even so, there is always the risk of notice: a drunken reveler, a stray dog, the sudden sweep of a city official's torch. Once their carts are full, the drivers slip quietly toward the gates. At certain hours, the guards have learned to expect them, and the great doors swing open just enough to let the carts pass through, always with a few muttered words and the clink of coins changing hands. Outside the walls, the air is colder, scented with wild grasses and the faint tang of distant fires. The city is left behind, the refuse carts following narrow rutted tracks that wind through fields and thickets. The places where the refuse is dumped are carefully chosen. Some are old quarries, pits dug deep in the earth. Others are fields left fallow, or the edge of a sluggish river where silt will cover what is left behind. Here, the drivers work with quiet efficiency, tipping barrels, raking out baskets, the noise swallowed by the night. Sometimes, they pause to gather fragments, bits of cloth, a broken spoon, a shard of colored glass, things that might have another use, or simply serve as a marker of a life once lived within the city's walls. When the work is done, the carts turn back toward home, lighter now, the drivers silent and weary. The sky is beginning to pale at the edges, the first hint of dawn brushing the city's spires with a faint glow. As they pass back through the gates, their presence is barely acknowledged, their carts already blending into the rhythm of the waking city. By the time most people rise, the traces of the night's journey are gone. Streets a little cleaner, courtyards swept, refuse vanished as if by magic. Yet the memory of the midnight carts lingers, tucked into the city's bones. For all their invisibility, the refuse collectors are a vital part of daily life, a quiet force working in the margins, ensuring that the streets remain passable, the water drinkable, the air bearable. Their work is seldom praised, rarely mentioned, and yet, in the soft sweep of the broom and the steady roll of the cart, lies the promise of another day begun in order, not chaos. So as you drift into rest, imagine the quiet roll of wheels across old stones, the gentle creak of wood, the soft snort of a patient horse. Think of the city sleeping, unaware of the silent journey beyond its walls. A journey made not for glory, but for the unending work of keeping life just a little bit cleaner, quieter, and more bearable for all. In every age, it is these hidden labors, done in darkness and silence, that bind a city together, shaping the comfort of daily life in ways few ever pause to see. The quiet system of hidden waste pits beneath stone courtyards. Imagine yourself standing in the courtyard of an old stone house. The walls around you are thick, their surfaces cool and rough beneath your palm, touched by generations of weather and hands. It is quiet here, save for the faint chirp of birds and the distant sound of a well bucket returning to earth. The courtyard is paved with smooth, time-worn stones, each one carefully laid, forming a sheltered space at the heart of the household. Beneath your feet, hidden from view and memory, lies a secret as old as settled life itself. Families living in such houses, across centuries and continents, devised discreet ways to manage the constant, unending tide of household waste. Among the most quietly ingenious was the creation of hidden waste pits, dug deep beneath courtyards and carefully concealed with wooden boards or stones. It is easy to overlook how much of daily life revolved around the problem of what to do with what was left behind. There were scraps from meals, ash from the hearth, broken bits of pottery, worn-out cloth, and all the refuse that accumulates in a home season after season. In crowded towns and villages, where space was precious and privacy valued, the discreet disposal of waste was a necessity, a silent duty carried out as regularly as cooking or tending animals. Families, often after long days of work, would quietly remove what was no longer needed. Sometimes it was the job of a child, sometimes an elder, sometimes a servant who moved unseen in the shadows. By lantern light or in the hush before dawn, they would lift a loose stone or a wooden plank, revealing the dark mouth of the pit below. Its edges might be lined with brick, or just the raw, packed earth. The depth was measured not in feet but in the passing of years, as each layer of unwanted things settled and slowly changed. The rhythm of their lives was marked by these small rituals. There was comfort in repetition, lifting the board, dropping in scraps, covering the hole again, all without a word. These acts became part of the background of existence, rarely spoken of, yet essential to the quiet functioning of the home. There was a kind of dignity in the silence, a respect for privacy, for the boundaries between what was useful and what was not. In these hidden pits, time worked differently. Layers of ash, bone, and broken objects mingled with kitchen waste and the sweepings of each season. Gradually, under the pressure of earth and the patient work of worms, everything changed. What was discarded slowly transformed, blending into the soil beneath the stones, nourishing the roots of unseen plants, or simply returning to the earth from which it all began. To outsiders, there were no signs. The courtyard looked the same as any other, orderly, swept, peaceful in the way only old places can be. Yet beneath, a quiet transformation unfolded year after year. Some pits were known only to the family, their location marked by a memory passed down through quiet conversation, a warning to children not to jump too hard on a certain stone, or to be careful when sweeping near a particular corner. There was a kind of ingenuity in these systems, a testament to the adaptability of people facing daily challenges without the comforts of modern waste collection. In towns where laws forbade open dumping or burning, these pits were a simple solution, private, effective, and nearly invisible. They held not just trash, but the history of a household, shards of a broken cup, the faded ribbon from a child's toy, the remains of feasts and lean years alike. Sometimes, when a house changed hands or a courtyard was dug up for repairs, the past would come to light all at once. Archaeologists and builders might find layers of compacted earth, rich with clues, seeds from forgotten fruits, tools worn smooth by decades of use, coins lost and never missed. In these discoveries, the quiet work of generations was revealed, their choices and habits layered in the soil. The rhythm of their lives continues to echo in these hidden places. Even as families grew, moved, or disappeared, the pits remained, a silent record, slowly folding the old into the new. There was a quiet wisdom in the system, an understanding that nothing truly leaves, it only changes form. As you imagine yourself in that courtyard, notice the softness of the air, the way light pools across old stones, and the gentle weight of time all around you. Beneath your feet, the earth holds a secret history of daily life, of silent labor, of the constant, gentle process of letting go. There is no rush here, only the slow, patient work of change, unfolding in darkness and silence. So as you drift into rest, think of those hidden waste pits, calm, unseen, quietly transforming what is left behind. In the stillness of night, the stones above remain cool and silent, while below, the story of a household continues, gently turning back into earth. The secret agreements with swineherds to eat what others would not. Imagine a village long before the coming of street lamps and tidy refuse collection, where the work of daily life produces a quiet accumulation of leftovers, scraps from kitchen tables, spoiled grain, peelings and crusts that pile up in corners and beneath hedges. In this world, cleanliness is an aspiration, not a guarantee, and the line between what is useful and what is waste is forever shifting with the seasons. As night gathers and shutters are drawn, the village's secret helpers begin their rounds, not the watchmen or the millers, but the swineherds, moving quietly through alleys and yards, their pigs in tow. By daylight, the swineherd's role is plain enough. Pigs are driven to the common pastures, rooting under hedgerows or sleeping in the shade of oaks. Their work is obvious, if unremarkable, a humble occupation, sometimes tinged with low status or the gentle mockery of neighbors. Yet, as dusk settles and the village grows hushed, another task emerges, shrouded in the soft ambiguity of custom and unspoken agreement. The swineherd receives a nod, a whispered word, a loaf passed through a back door, signaling that it is time for the pigs to do their less dignified work. You can picture the rhythm. A gate creaks softly, a figure in worn boots and a battered cap gestures into the shadows. The pigs, clever and persistent, nose their way along the winding lanes and behind kitchen gardens, seeking what the day's cooking has left behind. There is no announcement, no record kept, only the quiet understanding that, if scraps and spoiled grain disappear overnight, the swineherd's visit has been both welcomed and unspoken. These secret agreements are practical, almost ritualistic. Households know to leave waste within reach, not too obvious, never discussed in the open. Swineherds, in turn, respect invisible boundaries, cleaning what must be cleaned while leaving no trace of their passage. Sometimes a handful of coin changes hands, more often, payment is a friendly word, a small favor, or the promise of pork at the next feast. The pigs become living cleaners, transforming what would otherwise fester into food for the table or fat for the winter, their labor both vital and vaguely embarrassing. For those who look, the signs are everywhere. Alleyways, swept clean by morning, bear the marks of snouts and trotter prints. The air carries a hint of earth and something faintly sour, fading with the dawn. Villagers rarely speak of it, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of habit. To admit reliance on the swineherd service is to acknowledge the limits of one's own means, the inescapable cycles of waste and want that define rural life. Yet, beneath the surface, everyone understands that this is how the village endures. Swineherds themselves are keepers of many secrets. They know which homes offer the best scraps, which days bring extra spoilage, which families hide their need behind careful words. Their routes are mapped by memory and necessity, shifting as seasons change and harvests fluctuate. For the children, the sound of pigs snuffling in the darkness is both familiar and a little mysterious, a reminder that the night is filled with its own quiet industry, and that even the most humble animals serve a purpose. Among the elite, waste is managed differently, servants clear away the remains, and pigs are kept far from manor houses. Yet, even in grand households, kitchen staff sometimes reach secret arrangements with local swineherds, ensuring that leftovers are quietly spirited away, saving labor and sparing embarrassment. In this way, the rhythm of the secret pig rounds bridges social divides, linking the wealthy and the poor through the constant work of tidying and transforming. Historians and archaeologists rarely find direct evidence of these nighttime agreements. Instead, they glimpse hints in village ordinances, which sometimes forbid pigs from wandering freely, or in fines levied against those caught allowing animals to root too near the well or the market square. Occasionally, a diary or account book mentions the swineherd in passing, an errand after sunset, a gift of sausage at Christmastide. These fleeting references hint at a hidden economy, woven through the fabric of daily life, unrecorded but essential. If you imagine yourself at the threshold of your home, listening in the quiet for the low grunt of a pig or the muffled steps of a swineherd on the cobbles, you sense the depth of trust required for such agreements. The comfort of knowing that waste will be managed, that hunger will be eased, that a neighbor's work will quietly support your own. It is a rhythm almost as old as the village itself, repeated from one generation to the next, always half in shadow. So the pigs pass through the alleyways, cleaning and consuming, the swineherd following behind, both witness and participant in the secret pacts that sustain the village. By dawn, the scraps are gone, the lanes are quiet, and life resumes its measured pace. The agreements are rarely spoken of, yet they endure, binding neighbors together with the gentle persistence of routine, necessity, and trust. In this way, what others would not eat becomes a foundation for survival, and the humble swineherd's rounds remain a vital, if nearly invisible, part of the community's ongoing story. The silent workers who raked waste from gutter channels at dawn. Imagine the earliest hush of morning, before the town's rooftops catch even the faintest color of dawn. The air is cool and damp, thick with the muted scent of earth, stone, and last night's lingering wood smoke. It is at this quiet hour, while most of the town sleeps on entangled linen, that a small band of men begin their work, almost invisible in their quiet efficiency. With long-handled rakes, battered baskets, and rough-spun cloaks pulled close against the chill, they move in slow procession along the narrow, winding lanes. Their task is simple but endless. In a world before the comforts of modern plumbing or the regular visit of rubbish carts, every town, large or small, depended on these silent workers to keep its lifeblood, the street gutters and channels, flowing. Throughout the day, refuse would gather where rain and use directed it. Wind-blown straw, vegetable peels, scraps from the market, broken pottery, horse droppings, sooty clumps swept from hearths, and the faint, omnipresent silt carried by boots and wheels. When darkness fell, it all settled in quiet layers, pressing into the crevices and shallow streams that line the edges of the roads. By the time the town cocks begin to stir, the workers have already made their way from the outskirts, gathering near the town's main gate or a central square. They exchange few words. There is little need for chatter at this hour, and every scrape of rake or shush of basket is a language of its own. Some have worked together for years, recognizing each other by the rhythm of their steps or the way they shoulder their baskets. Others are new, drawn by need or family duty, learning the subtle choreography of raking, scooping, and hauling under the cloak of half-darkness. Moving methodically, they begin at one end of a lane. The long, heavy rakes, roughly hewn, patched, and stained by seasons of use, drag across the stone and packed earth, gathering a damp, tangled mass of silt and debris. The men work in pairs or small groups, one guiding the flow of muck, another sweeping the last clinging scraps from the shallows. From time to time, the baskets are filled and hauled to the waiting carts, a slow, steady relay. The carts themselves are worn, their wheels creaking softly as they are loaded with the night's yield, destined for compost heaps or, sometimes, fields on the edge of town. There is a peculiar rhythm to this labor. The scrape of rake on stone, the soft slap of wet refuse dropping into a basket, the muffled steps on dew-darkened lanes. Occasionally, a distant door opens as a baker rises to tend his oven, or a cat slips past, watching with bright, curious eyes. The workers rarely pause. Theirs is a race against the light, for by the time the sun crests the horizon and the first real bustle begins, the evidence of the night's accumulation must be mostly gone. This was work that seldom drew notice, even in its day. Unlike the spectacle of the market or the drama of the town crier, the gutter workers blended into the daily rhythm, known by sight but rarely by name. Their pay was meager, often just enough to keep bread on the table, and the task itself was thankless, finished today only to begin again tomorrow. Yet the importance of their work was felt in ways both subtle and profound. Clean streets, at least as clean as the age could afford, meant less disease, fewer vermin, and a measure of dignity for all who called the town home. Despite their low station, the workers knew the hidden geography of the town better than most. They saw which gutters flooded after a storm, where a broken cobblestone collected the most refuse, and which alleys bore the secret signatures of passing dogs and midnight wanderers. They learned, too, to recognize the signs of illness, how certain scraps in the gutter told of a household in trouble, or how the smell might change when water stood too long, breeding fever and complaint. Sometimes, in the pale blue of morning, their work drew quiet acknowledgement. An old woman might nod as she swept her step, or a merchant setting out wares would offer a crust of bread, a simple word of thanks. More often, though, the workers finished before the town truly woke, their labor erased by the bustle of daily life. By midday, the streets would fill with noise and color, and the quiet transformation of dawn would be forgotten. Yet, the work was never truly complete. Even as one lane was cleared, another filled. Even as a cart rolled away heavy with muck, another basket was needed. There was a comfort in this routine, a knowledge that, though the work would never end, the effort itself mattered. It shaped the unseen boundaries of cleanliness and order, offering, if not perfection, at least the promise of renewal. If you listen now, in your imagination, you might hear that gentle, steady rhythm. Rake against stone, basket against cart, the soft, communal hush of men working before the world awakens. In those quiet hours, history is shaped not by grand events, but by the persistent, nearly invisible labor of those who raked waste from gutter channels, making space for the day to begin anew. So, as the first golden light touches the rooftops and the silent workers slip away, leaving the lanes almost clean, remember that beneath the visible life of every town lies the patient work of hands and hours, repeating in comfort and necessity, day after day. A gentle, endless task, carried out while the world still dreams. The custom of covering household waste in layers of ash and straw. Imagine yourself stepping into a quiet medieval village as the pale morning light creeps over rooftops, touching frost-laced thatch and cold cobbles. The air is fresh, but laced with the subtle tang of wood smoke as families tend to early chores, stoking small fires and setting bread to rise. Behind the simple doors of each home, life is measured in practical routines. Small tasks repeated day after day, season after season. Among these, one stands out not for its drama, but for its steady, understated importance: the careful management of household waste. In an age before modern plumbing, before the convenience of weekly collections and sealed rubbish bins, the rhythm of disposal was different. Every home, from the humblest wattle and daub hut to the more substantial stone dwellings, generated scraps and refuse. Peelings from root vegetables, bones left after stewing, the remains of yesterday's bread, soiled straw, even the more personal and unpleasant leavings of daily life, all required thoughtful handling, lest the family's living space become overwhelmed by the slow accumulation of the unwanted. Imagine the central feature of this routine: a sturdy barrel or pit, placed in a shadowed corner of the yard, beneath an eave or beside a small kitchen garden. In some homes, it might be little more than a hollow in the earth, lined with stones or wood, carefully tended and kept away from the main paths of daily traffic. Into this went the household's waste, layer by careful layer. But waste was never left exposed. As you watch, imagine a woman or older child pausing at the barrel, a wooden bucket in hand. With practiced movements, they scatter a layer of cold, powdery ash, collected from the hearth after a morning of bread baking or porridge making, across the top of the pile. The ash is pale gray, fine as dust, and settles gently over what lies beneath. Its presence is both practical and symbolic, the residue of warmth and comfort, now repurposed as a silent guardian against the less pleasant realities of domestic life. Ash is not merely a cover. It acts as a desiccant, drawing moisture from the waste, suppressing the growth of insects and the rise of unpleasant smells. Its alkaline nature tempers acidity, slowing the spread of rot. Layer after layer, day after day, the rhythm continues. Waste, then ash, a gentle choreography of concealment and preservation. At week's end, or whenever the barrel begins to fill, another layer is added, this time of straw. The straw, golden and brittle, is the byproduct of harvest and animal bedding. It is scattered in thick handfuls, lending a deceptively tidy appearance to what lies beneath. The scent is faintly sweet, reminiscent of autumn fields and distant haylofts. To a casual glance, the barrel seems almost wholesome, tidy, managed, even cared for. Only those who tend it know the truth of what it contains. You might notice, as you linger, how this practice shapes the village as a whole. The management of waste is not merely personal, but communal. The regular layering of ash and straw keeps insects at bay, protecting not just one family, but neighbors as well. In the height of summer, when the air grows thick and flies multiply, these measures become more than custom. They are essential acts of care, woven into the village's survival. Imagine the texture of life shaped by this custom. Children learn early to carry out scraps and scatter ash with care, to shake out straw and sweep stray grains from the doorstep. It becomes a daily lesson in responsibility, a gentle reminder that every comfort, every convenience, carries a corresponding duty. The rhythm of these tasks is soothing, a constant backdrop to the more dramatic events of feast days and harvests. In the stillness of evening, when the work is done and the sky turns dark, the barrels rest quietly in their corners, their contents hidden and managed. The faint, earthy scent of straw lingers, mingling with the distant smell of hearth fires. The family inside the cottage feels the comfort of order, the knowledge that, for now, their home is protected from the encroachment of decay and disorder. But the story of waste does not end at the barrel's rim. Over time, the layered contents decompose, transformed by slow, unseen processes. When the barrel or pit is emptied, sometimes onto distant fields, sometimes into carefully tended compost heaps, the remnants of daily life become nourishment for the next season's growth. Ash and straw mingle with the soil, closing the loop between hearth and harvest, meal and memory. This cycle, though humble, binds the village together. It is echoed in countless acts of unseen labor, sweeping, mending, tending to animals, drawing water, lighting lamps. Each act is small in itself, but together they shape the quiet, enduring rhythm of survival. The custom of layering waste with ash and straw is both shield and sign, a way of holding back the disorder that always waits at the edge of comfort, and a gentle assertion of care, repeated daily, quietly, almost unnoticed. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind wander to these peaceful routines, the soft whisper of ash settling, the rustle of straw, the calm order of a village that keeps its secrets well hidden beneath tidy layers. In these rhythms, history comes alive not through grand events or dramatic battles, but through the persistent, patient acts of people simply doing what must be done to keep homes safe, clean, and whole for another day. The quiet law requiring each household to clear its own threshold. Imagine yourself waking to the first gray hint of dawn, in a city where stone and timber form a patchwork of houses pressed shoulder to shoulder along winding, narrow lanes. The world outside your shuttered window is quiet, the sounds of daytime commerce still distant, yet already gentle movement stirs beyond every threshold. This is a city bound not only by walls and towers, but by small, silent rules. Laws so woven into daily life that they often pass unnoticed, their power felt in the quiet orderliness that holds chaos at bay. One such rule governs the very edge of each home, the law that every household must clear its own threshold, sweeping away refuse before it spills into the public lanes. It is a law enforced less by threat than by routine, and it shapes the rhythms of the city with an understated persistence. For in a world without regular rubbish collection or the hum of modern sanitation, the burden of cleanliness falls on every resident, from the humblest tenant to the wealthiest merchant. Picture the city's streets at first light. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth, faded wood smoke, and here and there, the sharp tang of last night's supper or spilled ale. Outside each door, the first task of the day awaits. Families gather simple tools: a bundle of twigs tied tight with twine, a battered broom, a small shovel. Sometimes, a child is sent to fetch water from a nearby well, the pail knocking gently against their legs as they return. Sweeping is a ritual as familiar as breaking bread. The work begins quietly. A father or mother steps outside, broom in hand, and starts to brush away the scattered debris, bits of straw, chicken feathers, ashes, perhaps a crust of bread left for the birds, or a smear of mud tracked in by yesterday's rain. In some places, the threshold is nothing more than a stone slab, smooth and worn from years of feet passing back and forth. In others, it is a raised plank, designed to hold back the tide of filth that might otherwise seep inside. This act of cleaning is rarely spoken of in grand terms. Yet, beneath its ordinariness, it is a foundation of community life. The city's laws, inscribed on aging parchments and sometimes read aloud by town criers, decree that refuse must not be tossed heedlessly onto the shared lanes. To do so is to invite not just the censure of neighbors, but the attention of local officials, men whose job it is to keep the city's arteries clear and free-flowing. Fines are rare, but public shame is a potent deterrent. Most comply out of habit, understanding that disorder, once allowed, grows quickly. Imagine, too, the quiet choreography this law inspires. The sound of sweeping drifts along the lanes, soft and repetitive, a gentle percussion marking the day's beginning. Neighbors nod in greeting, sometimes exchanging a word or two about the weather or the price of grain. The children, still blinking sleep from their eyes, watch and learn. Soon enough, the task will be theirs. For now, they trace patterns in the dust, or chase one another around the buckets and brooms. As thresholds are cleared, the city gradually comes to life. Market stalls are set up, carts rattle by, dogs sniff at the fresh piles of sweepings ready to be carried away or scattered in kitchen gardens. By midday, the evidence of the morning's labor is all but gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of daily business. Yet the order remains. Each home, by tending its small patch of street, helps hold back the tide of squalor that forever threatens to engulf a crowded, bustling city. For the city's poorest, the work is sometimes a struggle. Without servants or sturdy brooms, their efforts are humble, perhaps only a handful of twigs, or the sweep of a rough hand. Yet the law applies to all, and in the shared discipline of sweeping, a quiet equality persists. Wealth may build higher walls, but no door is exempt from the need to keep its threshold clean. Over time, these daily acts leave their mark. Archaeologists, when peeling back the layers of ancient streets, often find the clearest evidence of past lives not in grand ruins, but in the packed layers of swept earth and debris built up year by year. Each layer tells a story, not of kings or battles, but of the ordinary, persistent work of maintaining a world in which life can flourish. The law itself changes little, its wording echoed from one generation to the next. Some may grumble or let the tasks slide on cold mornings, but for most, it becomes as natural as breathing, a moment of calm, a link in the unbroken chain of care that binds each family to their neighbors and to the city itself. As night falls, and shutters are closed once again, the cycle is complete. The city settles into a gentle hush, the lanes swept clean, the thresholds tidy. Tomorrow, the work will begin anew, as it always does, quiet, constant, and largely unseen. So as you drift towards sleep, imagine the soft sweep of brooms, the hush of dawn, and the quiet pride in a threshold left clean. In every age, it is these small, repeated acts, done without fanfare, carried out by hands both young and old, that uphold the hidden order of daily life. They are the silent laws that keep chaos at bay, stitching a community together with every gentle motion, one clean threshold at a time. The practice of burning rubbish in hidden courtyards at twilight. Imagine yourself in an old town where the sun slips quietly behind clustered rooftops, casting the streets in a soft blue shadow. The houses are close together, their stone walls warmed by the day, now slowly releasing their heat back into the cooling air. The evening is settling in, gentle and hushed. Across the neighborhood, windows are shuttered and doors closed, but somewhere behind high walls, another kind of evening ritual is beginning. Within certain homes, there are courtyards that feel hidden from the world. The walls are thick, overgrown with ivy or faded by the passage of seasons, enclosing a space that is both refuge and secret. Here, in the fading light of twilight, families gather up the day's rubbish, scraps of food, broken bits of wood, withered sweepings from the floor, and the endless, unremarkable detritus that daily life leaves behind. In towns where the burning of rubbish is forbidden, where rules and customs dictate how waste must be handled, such acts are carried out with quiet caution. The rhythm of their lives bends gently to this necessity. You can picture the scene. Someone, perhaps a father or mother, quietly stokes a small pile of rubbish in the courtyard's corner. The flame is coaxed from a few dry twigs, carefully shielded from the view of neighbors. Smoke begins to curl upward, at first a pale wisp, then a slender ribbon that disappears quickly into the growing dusk. The smell is faint, a mix of wood smoke, charred scraps, and the remnants of what has been swept aside from the day. This is not a celebration or a gathering. There is no conversation, only a purposeful silence as the fire does its work. The children may watch from a doorway, faces flickering in the uncertain light, learning that sometimes the rules of the day yield to the quiet necessities of home. The act itself is both practical and symbolic. Burning rubbish is a way to keep the household clean, to reclaim a sense of order. It is also, in its own way, an act of hope, that what is unwanted can be transformed, that the mess of living might be lessened, at least for a while. Outside the courtyard, the world continues as usual. A dog barks in the distance. Someone walks along the street, unaware of the small plume of smoke rising beyond the wall. The practice is carried out with discretion, careful that the smell or the sight of fire does not attract attention. In many towns, the burning of rubbish has been forbidden for reasons of health, fire safety, or simple order. Still, the rhythm of their lives finds its own path. Rules are weighed against need, and need, quietly, often prevails. As the fire burns down, embers glowing softly in the dimming light, the family returns inside. The ashes will be swept away, scattered in the garden or buried at the edge of the yard. The courtyard, once filled with the day's debris, is now quiet again, the air scented faintly with smoke and the lingering memory of flame. There is a gentle repetition to this ritual, a sense of comfort in its secrecy. Each evening as twilight falls, the process is repeated, rubbish gathered, fire built, smoke drifting skyward, carrying with it the small burdens of daily life. The act itself becomes a lullaby of sorts, a quiet assertion that, in a world of rules and scarcity, small acts of order and renewal can still be found. You can almost hear the soft crackle of burning wood, see the shifting play of light and shadow on old stone walls, feel the cool air of evening mixing with the warmth of the fire. The rhythm of their lives, marked by caution and care, continues quietly, unnoticed except by those within the household. In time, the embers fade. The courtyard settles back into stillness, watched over by the walls that keep its secrets safe. The world outside remains unchanged, yet within these hidden spaces, a gentle transformation has taken place, one that speaks to the endurance, discretion, and hopefulness of people managing their needs in the quiet moments at the edge of night. So as you drift in thought, picture those twilight courtyards, the hush of evening, the faint trail of smoke, and the gentle comfort found in the ordinary, unspoken acts of daily life. The rhythm of the day gives way to the calm of night, and beneath the surface, the cycle of renewal continues, quietly as it always has. The unseen trenches dug to carry filth beyond the outer walls. Imagine yourself standing in the center of a small medieval town as the sun rises, casting pale light over sloping rooftops and winding lanes. The cobbled streets, still wet with the dew of morning, appear timeless and sturdy, laid stone by careful stone across the years. Yet, beneath this familiar ground, a quieter story is flowing. A story most residents choose not to notice, even as it shapes the rhythm of their lives. Hidden just below the surface, running between cellar walls and under thresholds, are shallow trenches, narrow, sometimes uneven, and always working in secret. These are the arteries of the town's survival, dug patiently by hand and improved little by little as seasons pass. Each trench is designed with a single purpose: to carry away the waste and runoff of daily life, guiding it beyond the walls, away from the wells, out to the margins where it will be forgotten or, in time, absorbed back into the fields. Every household contributes to this silent flow. Chamber pots are emptied with practiced discretion, their contents poured into gutters or down small openings in the street. Laundry water, filled with the faint scent of lye and ash, is flung from doorways. The runoff from kitchens, thick with the traces of meals and careful thrift, finds its way along familiar paths, guided by the slope of the ground. Few wish to dwell on what these rivulets carry: remnants of illness, the slow dissolution of scraps and dirt, the daily refuse of so many lives packed closely together. Yet this is the reality that sustains the community, an ongoing cycle of use, disposal, and renewal. The trenches themselves are humble constructions. Some are lined with stone, others left as pressed earth, their edges shaped by countless feet and the occasional shovel. Rainwater, when it comes, swells their flow, sometimes flooding streets before retreating outwards in a broad, muddy stream. Children learn early to avoid the slick patches and stagnant puddles. The elders know which streets to avoid after a storm, where the water runs deepest and the smells linger longest. At times, the trickle is nearly silent, a gentle seepage heard only in the hush of early morning or late at night. At other times, it grows to a steady, urgent rush, the product of a dozen kitchens and the sudden wash of rain. You can imagine the routine maintenance required, a rhythm as old as the streets themselves. Townspeople, young and old, take their turns lifting stones, clearing blockages, or directing the flow with shovels and wooden boards. It is not pleasant work, yet it is understood to be necessary. Without it, filth would rise, wells would foul, sickness would spread. These shallow trenches, rarely spoken of except in passing complaint, are a quiet bulwark against disaster. In larger towns, a few fortunate streets are served by more elaborate drains, covered and bricked, echoing faintly with the flow beneath. But for most, the trenches remain open or only loosely covered, visible after heavy rain or in the slow thaw of spring. Sometimes, the line between street and drain blurs entirely. The gutter becomes the pathway the drain. This porous boundary is simply accepted, part of the fabric of daily existence. For the wealthy, the story is a little different. Large houses may boast private privies, inner courtyards where waste is managed more discreetly, or even small channels that direct refuse away from the doorstep. Yet, even here, all roads lead outwards, joining the same web of trenches that bind rich and poor together in a shared dependence on unseen currents. No household, no matter how grand, is wholly separate from the system. All contribute, all rely on the silent work beneath their feet. Occasionally, visitors or officials express concern about the smell, the risk of disease, the inconvenience of a street awash after rain. Laws are passed, fines imposed, efforts made to keep the flow contained and orderly. Yet, year after year, the trenches remain, improved, cleaned, sometimes realigned, but never quite replaced. The memory of floods or outbreaks lingers, reminders of what happens when the flow is interrupted or misdirected. Archaeologists, digging beneath modern streets, sometimes uncover the traces of these ancient systems. A stone-lined channel, blackened earth marking the line of an old trench, shards of pottery or lost coins swept along in the current and caught in a sudden bend. These remnants speak not of innovation, but of quiet adaptation, the slow, persistent effort to manage the byproducts of community life. If you imagine yourself, late at night, listening from your window, You might hear the faint trickle of water beneath the cobbles, or the soft splash as a neighbor empties a basin into the gutter. It is a background noise so constant it almost disappears. A comfort, in its way, evidence that the cycle continues, that the unseen machinery of the town endures. With each dawn, the streets dry, the smells fade, and life resumes as if the trenches do not exist. But beneath every step, the silent flow carries on, an unremarked foundation for survival, a quiet reminder that the work of carrying filth away is as essential as baking bread or drawing water. The trenches lie hidden, their presence known but rarely acknowledged, shaping the rhythm of daily life in ways both humble and profound, ensuring that the village remains whole, season after season, year after year. The custom of tossing chamber waste into dark alley drains. Imagine a narrow alleyway in a medieval town, shrouded in night. The stones underfoot are damp and uneven, glistening where candlelight flickers behind tightly shuttered windows. Above, lines of laundry sway faintly in a draft, and the air is tinged with the blended sense of wood smoke, bread, and less pleasant, lingering notes that drift where the breeze wills. In this setting, beneath the hush of a sleeping city, a quiet, practical ritual unfolds, a custom woven into the fabric of daily life, though seldom spoken of in daylight. Within the walls of these crowded homes, where space was tight and privacy rare, chamber pots were a fact of existence. Each family kept one or more close at hand, tucked beneath beds or beside chairs, their use as ordinary as drawing water or tending the fire. By day, the pots might be emptied into a cesspit or carried to the communal midden. But when the darkness pressed in and the streets emptied of their daytime bustle, a different solution beckoned, one as old as the city's first winding lanes. The custom was simple, if frowned upon. With night as a shield and the world wrapped in quiet, some householders would step to the door, lift the latch with practiced care, and slip into the shadowy embrace of the alleyway. In one hand, the familiar weight of the chamber pot. In the other, perhaps a lantern or nothing at all. A glance to left and right, searching for the absent patrol, the curious neighbor, or the wakeful stray. Then, with a quick, practiced motion, the pot was emptied into the drain, its contents vanishing with a soft splash or a faint, muffled gurgle. The relief was immediate. No need to haul waste across the town, no risk of tripping on the uneven paths in darkness, no awkward encounter with the watchful eyes of others. In a town where most lived close to the ground and closer still to one another's business, this nighttime act was understood but rarely acknowledged. Sometimes a whispered, "Gardes low," the old warning to those below, floated down from upper windows, a last courtesy to the unseen. Officials did not approve. Edicts were posted, fines threatened, and stern words issued from town halls and parish pulpits. The drains, after all, were meant for stormwater and the occasional spill of wash water, not the nightly offerings of countless chamber pots. The risk of foul smells, choked channels, and disease was real, and the town authorities, tasked with keeping order and health, fought a losing battle against habit and necessity. Yet the practice persisted, for rules that ran counter to convenience and comfort seldom stood unbroken. The drains themselves were modest things, cut or cobbled into the alley's edge, sometimes little more than a shallow trench or a crude stone conduit. By day, they might run dry, save for a trickle after rain. By night, they became silent, swift conveyors, carrying away not just waste, but the evidence of 1,000 daily routines. Downstream, the consequences gathered, in flooded cellars, in stagnant pools beyond the city walls, in the low, marshy places where no one lingered long. For most households, the custom was a quiet relief in a life filled with small discomforts. The act of emptying a chamber pot became, over time, almost invisible, a gesture carried out with as little thought as drawing the night's water or barring the door. Children learned to keep quiet, to close the shutters quickly, to look away from the alley when the hour grew late. The city's rhythm, shaped by countless such acts, ticked on. The morning after, the streets told few tales. In the fresh daylight, apprentices swept stoops, shopkeepers opened shutters, and mothers sent children with buckets to fetch water. The drains, carrying the hidden residue of the night, burbled softly beneath it all. From time to time, a town crier or the local constable might pause at a clogged grating, frowning at the telltale blockage or the unexpected whiff, but the origin of the mischief was seldom traced. Over generations, the habit changed little, even as the city grew. Occasionally, a particularly memorable edict or a bout of illness would spark greater vigilance, extra patrols, new rules, a round of stern sermons at church. Yet, as dusk fell and windows brightened with lamplight, the alleyways filled once more with the soft, familiar sounds of doors opening, pots tipping, and water running in the dark. For those who performed this nightly ritual, there was rarely shame, only the understanding that necessity often wrote its own rules. The world was imperfect, and each home, however careful, relied on a mix of official order and private custom to get by. To empty the chamber pot was a small, essential act. A way of shaping comfort from discomfort, of making the best of what was available. No one boasted of it, few even spoke of it. Yet, as history crept quietly forward, the custom endured, one more thread in the tapestry of daily life. So, as you drift now through these shadowed lanes in imagination, picture the quiet exchange, the swift motion, the hush of relief, the way the world keeps turning despite the flaws and follies of its people. And in the morning, as the city stirs to life once more, let your mind rest on the knowledge that even the smallest, most secret customs leave their mark, carried quietly downstream and written into the memory of places where night still lingers. The secret use of broken amphorae to bury unwanted debris. Imagine yourself wandering the worn paths of a small medieval settlement as twilight falls, the day's last rays gilding stone walls and the faded red roofs of outbuildings. The sounds of the village are muted now, the bleat of a distant goat, the clatter of a wooden pail, the low voices of neighbors bidding one another good night. Between cottage and garden, shed and stable, there lies a world of small rituals, practical secrets, and the ever-present need to manage what is left behind. Amphorae, those once proud vessels of clay that ferried wine, oil, and grain across continents, dot the landscape in their second lives, long after their handles have broken or their sides have cracked beyond repair. Once, they held the wealth of empires. Now, they sit in the shadow of sheds and beneath the eaves, waiting for a quieter role. In a world without plastic or convenient refuse collection, every household learns to make use of what is at hand. Even broken amphorae are not simply discarded. Imagine a woman kneeling by the garden's edge in the pale light of morning, turning over a fractured jar in her hands. Its rim is chipped, its sides webbed with lines where frost and time have left their mark. Yet within the jar, there is still purpose. Bones from last night's stew, rags too threadbare to mend, small handfuls of ashes swept from the hearth, all are placed inside with practiced care. The process is methodical. Debris goes in, heavier items first, lighter ones packed around the edges. The amphora, now heavy again, is ready for its final journey. These old vessels become silent companions to the rhythms of daily life. Sometimes, the amphora is set aside for days or weeks, slowly filling as the needs of the household dictate. It may rest in a shadowy corner of the kitchen or beside the door to the yard, its contents accumulating unnoticed, quietly tidying away the detritus of daily survival. There is a reason for such secrecy and discretion. Refuse left exposed can attract animals, offend neighbors, or, in crowded quarters, risk the spread of illness. A broken amphora, once filled, offers a kind of containment, a way to seal away what is no longer wanted, granting both order and peace of mind. The act of filling it is never spoken of openly, for to dwell on what must be hidden is to invite discomfort, even shame. And so, the ritual remains unmentioned, an unbroken thread woven through the fabric of village life. When the amphora is finally full, another ritual begins. Under cover of dusk or in the quiet hours before dawn, the vessel is carried to its resting place. Sometimes, a corner of the garden is chosen, a patch of earth beneath a spreading tree, or beside a wall where the ground is soft. In other households, the space beneath a shed or lean-to becomes the preferred hiding place, out of sight and away from wandering feet. The amphora is lowered gently into a shallow pit, earth heaped over it, straw or pebbles scattered atop to mask the disturbance. In a day or two, not even the memory of its burial lingers on the surface. Beneath the soil, The amphora joins countless others, layers of forgotten debris marking the passage of seasons, each vessel a silent archive of what was once necessary and is now gone. The garden grows above, green and untroubled. Roots twine through the earth, brushing against old clay, unaware of the stories buried below. Sometimes, in the far future, a new spade may strike something hard, a shard of pottery, still holding the dark ghost of ashes or a fragment of cloth. But for now, the secret remains undisturbed. This quiet method of waste management is as much about dignity as it is about cleanliness. In an era when reputation and harmony are carefully guarded, the ability to keep one's household tidy, without drawing notice to its necessary imperfections, is a point of pride. Children learn from an early age to respect these customs, helping to carry small bundles, watching as elders tamp earth around the rim of a jar. The lesson is simple but enduring. What must be left behind can be handled with care and then gently forgotten. Not all amphorae serve the same purpose. Some are reserved for specific kinds of waste, bones only, or old rags, or the fine siftings from the hearth. Others may hold broken toys, shattered cups, or scraps from last year's festival, their contents telling the private story of a family's fortunes and losses. Over time, even the memory of what was hidden fades, replaced by the green hush of new growth and the slow passage of days. The practice extends beyond the home, shaping the village in subtle ways. Sheds and gardens become repositories not just for tools and crops, but for the secrets of countless households. Yet this is not a source of anxiety. Rather, it is a quiet comfort, a shared understanding that each family tends to its own affairs, and that the world is large enough to hold both what is cherished and what is left behind. Imagine, as you drift towards sleep, the cool weight of an old amphora in your hands, the gentle thud of earth as you cover it for the last time. The air is still, the night is quiet, and somewhere overhead, the stars shine down on gardens both new and old. In this gentle concealment, there is peace, a soft, unspoken reassurance that even what is broken can find a place, hidden safely away, as life carries on above. The whispered warnings about letting waste heap too high indoors. Imagine yourself in the hushed glow of a single candle, deep in the heart of a city or village centuries ago. Outside, the wind stirs dust along the lanes, rattling shutters and carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke. But inside, the world is smaller and softer. A world of hearth and rush-strewn floors, of corners shadowed by the low firelight, of quiet conversations held in whispers while the rest of the house sleeps. In this time, the boundaries of cleanliness and comfort are fragile, negotiated day by day within the four walls of each home. There is no public service to whisk rubbish away, no steady rhythm of municipal carts. Instead, families bear the responsibility themselves, and with it, the quiet anxiety that comes with knowing that, if left unchecked, the waste of daily living can slowly begin to claim more and more space. Waste in this world is not only a matter of filth, but of quiet fear. Everyone knows that the refuse of a household, ashes from the hearth, peelings from the kitchen, soiled rushes, scraps of food, even old rags and broken things, can easily build up, especially through the long, closed-in months of winter. Sometimes, in the press of daily life, it is easy to let things slide. A bucket fills faster than it is emptied. A corner becomes a convenient place to drop bones or sweep dust. The pace of survival rarely allows for perfect order. But memories of past illness linger in every family's mind. Across generations, stories are whispered about years when sickness swept through homes. Illness that some said began with neglect, with a household that let refuse rise too high, inviting rats and other creatures drawn to warmth and crumbs. Even if the true cause is not always understood, the association is strong, and the lesson is repeated in soft tones, often in the quietest hours. Keep the waste low, and do not let your guard slip. Neighbors play a subtle but vital role in this unending battle against the silent encroachment of dirt and disorder. In the gentle culture of caution and care, warnings are never shouted or shaming. Instead, reminders pass softly from one doorstep to another, or over the fence as bread is shared. Best not let the heap in the corner grow much taller. A neighbor might murmur, their voice low enough to blend with the crackle of the hearth. The words are gentle, a kindness meant to protect both health and reputation. The act of clearing refuse is woven into the daily rhythm. Each morning, someone, often the youngest child or the oldest grandparent, will sweep the floors with a bundle of twigs, collecting the day's scraps into a basket or pail. In winter, when the world outside is cold and unwelcoming, the task is sometimes put off, but never for long. There is a persistent undercurrent of worry. What if someone should visit and see the pile too high? What if word should spread? The fear is not only of vermin or disease, but of being judged as careless, as a household that brings trouble upon itself and, perhaps, upon neighbors as well. Small signs become matters of great meaning. The presence of a rat's tail beneath the cupboard, or the sound of scratching behind the hearthstones, is enough to prompt immediate action. It's best to clear the pail before nightfall, someone will say, and so the refuse is quietly gathered and carried outside, disposed of in the yard, the midden, or added to the growing pile behind the garden wall, always with the hope that the city's night carts or the passing farm dog will help keep the rest at bay. For those who live close together, tenements in the town, rows of cottages in the countryside, the responsibility is collective as well as personal. No one wishes to be the source of trouble, and so even as families mind their own business, they keep a gentle eye on the habits of others. The exchange of warnings and advice is almost ritual, not quite gossip, not quite command, but a mutual safeguarding. To remind a neighbor is to offer protection, not just criticism. Over time, some homes become known for their fastidiousness, while others carry a quieter reputation. Yet, beneath these subtle differences, everyone shares in the same fear, that letting waste heap too high indoors will bring more than just discomfort. The threat of suspicion is real. In a world where illness is mysterious and invisible, people are quick to look for causes, and few wish to be blamed for inviting misfortune into the lane. The practice of whispering warnings, of gently urging vigilance, helps keep communities safer, though the results are not always perfect. Even the most careful home may find itself beset by pests or swept up in a wave of sickness that no amount of sweeping can prevent. Still, the effort continues, day after day. Each act of clearing refuse, each quiet reminder, a small stand against the unseen dangers that press in from outside. As seasons turn and the world changes, new methods of cleaning and disposal will come, and the old fears may fade. Yet, there is something quietly enduring in the memory of these whispered warnings, a reminder of how daily life is shaped by small, persistent acts of care, and by the quiet courage it takes to face the shadowy threats that cannot be named. As you let this story settle, imagine yourself in the quiet warmth of a lamplit room, the sweep of a broom on the rushes, the low voice of a neighbor reminding you to keep your home safe and sound. In every age, it is these gentle warnings, these softly spoken rituals, that preserve comfort and health, unseen, but deeply felt, and always woven into the fabric of daily survival. The ritual of sprinkling lime over the midden each month. Imagine yourself waking to the first gentle light of morning in a small town, long before the age of modern sanitation. The air is cool, tinged with the faint scent of wood smoke and the faraway promise of the day's baking. The cobbled streets are quiet, but beneath this calm, the subtle, persistent realities of daily life are always at work. In the midst of these realities stands the town midden, a large communal heap, the silent repository for everything that is cast off or unwanted. The midden sits at the edge of town, tucked behind stone walls or hedges, a presence so constant it fades into the background of everyday thought. Scraps from kitchen tables, broken tools, tattered rags, and all manner of refuse find their way here, day after day, each contribution layering over the last. By the end of a month, the heap is a patchwork of colors and textures, sometimes teeming with life, always marked by the steady processes of decay. For most of the year, the midden's existence is simply endured. It is a necessity, a fact of community living, quietly managed and rarely discussed. Yet, as the pile grows, so too do the odors that rise from it, earthy, sour, persistent. When the breeze changes, these scents drift into the narrow lanes, mingling with the smell of bread or rain or damp earth, a constant reminder of what lies just out of sight. It is in response to this unspoken discomfort that a simple ritual emerges, shaped by habit and necessity alike. Each month, when supplies allow, someone is tasked with sprinkling lime across the surface of the midden. The lime is a pale powder, chalky and fine, sometimes carried in a rough sack, sometimes scooped by hand from a wooden bucket. Its arrival is almost ceremonial in its own small way, greeted with a sense of reassurance and mild relief. As the powder is spread, a quiet transformation takes place. The white dust settles over scraps and peelings, over bones and broken pottery, softening the harsh outlines of recent refuse. The sharp, acrid tang of lime drifts through the air, overlaying older, deeper smells. There is comfort in the way the odor sharpens, then fades, replaced by something that feels almost clean, at least for a while. Those who tend the midden move with a careful rhythm, casting handfuls of lime in wide arcs. The powder drifts down, coating everything it touches, working its way into the corners and crevices. In the days that follow, the mound seems quieter, subdued, as if held in temporary suspension by the gentle shroud of lime. For residents, the ritual is more than just maintenance. It is a statement of control, a reassurance that decay, for all its inevitability, can at least be managed. Sometimes, the task falls to an older child who returns home with white dusted hands, or to an elder who remembers when lime was scarce and the midden ran unchecked. There is a gentle repetition to the act, a cycle that marks the passing of weeks and months. Each time the powder is scattered, it draws a line between the lived-in spaces of the town and the unavoidable presence of its refuse. You can imagine the sound of lime sifting from hand to heap, the subtle crunch of footsteps across layers of discarded things, the way light catches on the new, pale surface. In the heat of summer, the powder cakes and cracks, its scent mingling with wildflowers and fresh grass. In winter, the lime becomes a thin crust, shielding the mound from rain and snow, slowing the work of decay. There is a quiet dignity in these small, persistent acts of care. The ritual of sprinkling lime is never celebrated, never announced, yet its comfort is felt by all. For a few days after, the town feels lighter, as if the boundaries between order and disorder have been gently restored. It is a reminder that even the least pleasant aspects of daily life can be softened, if not erased, by shared effort and quiet routine. The history of a town is often told through its grand events, festivals, markets, the building of churches, or the outbreak of storms. Yet, beneath these, the steady, humble rituals of maintenance and management continue without end. The rhythm of their lives is measured in these acts, in the tending of gardens, the mending of fences, the careful, monthly scattering of lime over the midden. As you drift into thought, picture the town at dusk, the last rays of sun glinting off the white-tipped mound, the air quietly refreshed, the households breathing easier. The lime will fade, the midden will rise again, and the cycle will continue, a quiet testament to the patience, endurance, and gentle hopefulness of those who found ways to keep decay at bay, at least for a time. The practice of digging cesspits far from living quarters. Imagine yourself at the edge of a quiet homestead, where the air carries the scent of damp grass and turned earth, and the first light of morning falls on vegetable beds bordered by rough wooden fences. Beyond the last row of beans or the tangled brambles of a berry hedge, the land dips gently, leading toward a patch of ground that is both carefully chosen and quietly avoided. Here, a family's cesspit lies hidden, a simple, practical solution to one of daily life's most persistent needs. Long before the modern flush toilet or municipal sewer, waste had to be managed by hand and habit. In densely built towns, options were few, and the refuse of daily life often lingered close at hand. But where space allowed, on the edges of villages, in the gentle sprawl of a farmstead, families made a different choice. They dug their cesspits well beyond the walls of the house, past gardens and tool sheds, out where neither smell nor sickness would so easily drift back toward the place of sleep and supper. The work itself was careful and methodical. A trench was dug, sometimes deeper than a person's height, its sides reinforced with rough stones collected from the fields or, when available, bricks scavenged from old walls. The lining slowed the seep of liquid into the soil, kept the pit's sides from crumbling and, so it was hoped, contained unpleasantness beneath the surface. Once finished, the pit would be covered over with planks or a loose lid of thatch and earth, strong enough to keep out wandering animals but light enough to be moved when the time came to empty or refill. Each morning and evening, someone in the household would make the short walk down the path, an unremarkable part of the daily rhythm, as ordinary as fetching water or feeding hens. Buckets or chamber pots were carried in one hand, a stick or lantern in the other for balance. The act itself was rarely discussed, wrapped in a privacy maintained by both distance and routine. Children might be sent along as they grew old enough, learning not only the path through the dew-wet grass but also the unspoken etiquette that kept the household running smoothly. You can picture the quiet ingenuity that shaped these arrangements. The cesspit's distance from the well was no accident. Families knew, through bitter experience or the wisdom of elders, that water could carry sickness just as easily as it could bring life. To keep waste at bay was to guard against the slow creep of illness that could slip, unseen, into bread or broth. Yet, understanding was incomplete. No one spoke of microbes or the chemistry of soil, but the instinct to separate clean from unclean, home from hazard, shaped the landscape in lasting ways. Over time, as one pit filled, another would be dug, the old covered and left to rest. Sometimes, after a year or more, the earth above would be turned for compost or fruit trees, the memory of what lay below softened by time and the constant work of the seasons. In this cycle, waste was not only hidden, but gradually transformed, broken down by worms and rain, surrendered back to the land. The compromise was imperfect. Smells lingered after rain, flies found their way even through careful covering, and in flood or drought, troubles might still seep closer than anyone liked. Yet, for centuries, it was the best solution that knowledge and circumstance allowed. Among wealthier households, cesspits might be more formally constructed, lined with carefully cut stone, topped with heavy lids, or set at a discreet distance behind walled gardens. In cities, the pits were dug wherever space could be found, their presence marked by subtle signs: a patch of sunken earth, a vented shaft, or the faint odor carried on the breeze. The poor, with less land and fewer choices, managed as best they could, sometimes sharing pits between families, sometimes resorting to shallow trenches or buckets emptied under cover of darkness. Archaeologists today find the traces of these old cesspits as dark, uneven stains in the soil, often rich with fragments of pottery, bones, seeds, and lost trinkets swept away with the household refuse. Each pit is a time capsule, a record of the daily struggle to balance comfort and necessity, knowledge and tradition. In the careful spacing of pits, the layering of stone, and the quiet paths that lead out beyond the home, we glimpse a world shaped by common sense and quiet compromise. If you imagine yourself on the path in early dawn or the last fading light, the house receding behind you, the garden silent and the grass cool beneath your feet, you might sense the subtle reassurance such habits brought. The pit itself, hidden among wildflowers and tangled vines, is no longer a source of shame but a testament to care, evidence that even the most humble routines are shaped by thoughtfulness and the slow accumulation of knowledge. And so, the practice endures, digging pits not for display, but for the quiet management of life's necessities, each one a marker of adaptation and persistence. The rhythm of daily life continues, anchored by small acts of separation and return, by the steady work of keeping home and danger apart. The cesspit, lined with stone and shaded by time, becomes part of the landscape, unremarked, yet essential, a quiet compromise between what families hope to know and what they learned, season by season, to do. The belief that night soil collectors carried unseen taint. Imagine a city just before dawn, its narrow lanes and tall, leaning houses veiled in blue shadow. The air is cool, carrying the last hush of night before the world begins its slow stir toward morning. If you listen closely, you might hear the distant creak of wooden wheels, the low murmur of tired voices, and the steady rhythm of boots against cobblestones. Somewhere, on the edges of sleep and waking, a cart makes its rounds, a cart known to every city dweller, but rarely discussed at breakfast. In the long centuries before modern plumbing, cities depended on a silent, invisible workforce. These were the night soil collectors, the men, and sometimes women, who braved the darkest hours to haul away what everyone left behind. Their job was both necessary and quietly reviled. The emptying of cesspits, the gathering of waste, and the slow, steady journey from alley to field, from city center to the margins of farmland. Without them, life in crowded towns would have been quickly overwhelmed by its own refuse. Yet for all their service, the collectors moved through the world as if wreathed in a subtle, invisible shadow. To see a night soil collector by daylight was to see someone set apart. Even after the hardest washing, after hands were scrubbed raw with lye soap and faces splashed with water at public fountains, a sense of unseen taint clung stubbornly. Neighbors, shopkeepers, and even distant family members kept a careful distance, stepping aside in the street or lowering their gaze when passing. It was as if the work itself, the long hours spent handling what others avoided, left behind a residue deeper than dirt, an impression that water could not wash away. For those who did the work, this quiet shunning became a fact of life. Children born into families of collectors often found the same doors closed to them, the same sidelong glances and silent judgments. Even their voices, so often heard in the silent hours of the city, faded in daylight, muffled by the invisible wall of custom and fear. The stories whispered among townsfolk spoke not only of the odor of the carts, but of the belief that misfortune or sickness could follow in a collector's wake, that a touch, a shared cup, or even a chance encounter might bring contamination home. And yet, for all this, the collector's labor was essential. Each night, while the city slept, they moved quietly through alleys and courtyards, guided by the pale gleam of lanterns. With shovels, buckets, and strong backs, they emptied pits and barrels, working swiftly to avoid drawing attention. The carts, heavy with their burden, rolled out beyond the city's edge to fields waiting for enrichment. There, the waste would become fertilizer, an unwelcome yet vital link in the chain that turned refuse into harvest, night's discards into next season's bread. The cities themselves depended on this cycle, though it was easy to forget. Without the collectors, cesspits would overflow, streets would become impassable, and illness would sweep through houses like a cold wind. Officials knew this truth, however much they preferred to ignore the collectors in public or restrict their movement to certain quarters. Quiet arrangements ensured the work continued. A few coins exchanged at dusk, a gate left unlatched, a corner of the market set aside where a collector might buy food without words. Even in isolation, the collectors formed a kind of community. Among themselves, there was solidarity, a shared understanding of risk, endurance, and the strange freedom of the night. In some cities, entire streets or neighborhoods were known as the Gatherer's Quarter, places where the rules of daylight did not reach so harshly. Here, families ate together, celebrated festivals, and told their own stories, tales of cleverness and perseverance, of small victories in a world that barely noticed their presence. From time to time, the outside world would be reminded of the collector's importance, when a pestilence was averted, or when a flood threatened and the only passable route was along a newly cleared channel. In these moments, gratitude flickered briefly, and the collectors moved almost in the open, their work acknowledged if not embraced. But soon enough, as the city's crisis faded, old habits returned, and the invisible barrier of belief settled in once more. The sense of taint was more than simple fear of disease. It was a kind of social alchemy, transforming the necessary into the forbidden, the vital into the marginalized. Over centuries, this belief was woven into customs, stories, and even the laws that governed where collectors could live, whom they could marry, and what rights they held. For the collectors themselves, it was a quiet burden, one born with the same steady patience they brought to their nightly rounds. Yet in the soft, gray hours before dawn, as the city's roofs glistened with dew and the world waited to wake, the collectors' work carried on. Step by step, they kept the city livable, each load removed one small victory against the rising tide. Their reward was not praise or comfort, but the knowledge that, without them, everything else would falter. So as you drift into sleep, imagine the silent procession, the slow roll of wheels, the gentle slosh in the darkness, the quiet hands that keep the city clean while the world turns away. Remember that, sometimes, the most essential work leaves the fewest traces, save for the gentle echo of footsteps, the hush of wheels, and the unseen courage that shapes life from the shadows, night after night. The use of plaster to seal walls against creeping damp and stench. Imagine yourself standing in a small, low-ceilinged room of a medieval cottage, its walls close, their surfaces cool and faintly rough beneath your fingertips. The world outside is restless, rain falling in steady drifts, wind pressing at warped shutters, but inside, all is muffled, contained, the hearth's gentle glow casting amber light along the plastered walls. Here, maintenance and survival have become indistinguishable, woven together in the quiet rhythm of daily life. It is easy to overlook the humble layer of plaster that coats these walls. Unremarkable in color, an off-white, sometimes tinged with ochre or the faintest gray, it absorbs the flicker of candlelight, softening edges and blurring the memory of stone beneath. But this modest surface is a silent guardian, an unsung barrier against two relentless adversaries: the creeping damp that rises from below, and the persistent, invisible stench that drifts upward from what lies hidden out of sight. Beneath the floors and sometimes behind the walls, medieval homes often hid pits and cavities, spaces used to store household waste, old straw, the sweepings from daily chores. Over time, these pockets of refuse produced more than just inconvenience. They became wellsprings of odor and damp, threatening both comfort and health. When rain fell heavily or the thaw of spring seeped in, the air itself could feel thick and uncertain, carrying hints of decay that lingered no matter how many windows were flung wide. The answer, passed quietly from generation to generation, was plaster. This was not the gleaming, decorative finish found in grand halls or the chapels of wealthy patrons. Instead, it was practical, homemade, a blend of lime, sand, straw, and sometimes animal hair, mixed in small batches in the yard or beside the hearth. The process was slow, measured, and almost meditative. Water was added, the mixture stirred by hand until it reached a heavy, workable consistency. The scent was earthy, cool, and faintly sharp, a promise of what was to come. Imagine a householder kneeling on a reed mat, trowel in hand, carefully pressing the thick plaster into every crack and seam. Fingers trace over uneven stones, smoothing the mixture into tiny gaps, layering it inch by inch along the cold interior walls. The work is not rushed, each patch demands attention, every corner a small battle against the slow invasion of moisture and the unkind trace of scent. Children watch and sometimes help, learning the feel of fresh plaster beneath their palms, the art of spreading it just so. The application of plaster is as much ritual as repair. Each year, or whenever walls show the telltale signs of shadowy damp or the first hint of must, families gather to renew this protective shell. The task is rarely discussed outside the home. It is not the subject of village gossip or the pride of festival days. Yet it is as essential to comfort as the drawing of water or the mending of clothes. Without it, the home would quickly lose its fragile balance, the line between shelter and hardship blurring with every passing storm. As the fresh plaster dries, its presence is both felt and unseen. The walls become smoother, paler, their surfaces holding the subtle memory of each careful touch. The damp is held at bay for a season more, the thick odors of hidden pits contained beneath an unbroken layer. Even in the middle of winter, when fires burn low and doors remain shut against the cold, the cottage feels cleaner, brighter, a quiet reward for an uncelebrated labor. The benefits of plaster reach beyond hygiene. Its presence tempers the extremes of weather, holding warmth within on cold nights and offering cool relief when summer sun beats against the thatch. In time, the plaster itself develops a patina, a patchwork of repairs, each layer marking another year's quiet struggle against the elements. Some areas grow thick and ridged, showing where old cracks reappeared and were sealed once more. Others remain thin and almost luminous, evidence of gentle hands and careful stewardship. In the rhythm of the household, plastering is simply another recurring act, its significance woven into the fabric of daily life. It is not commemorated, not the subject of ballads or stories told beside the fire. Yet, without it, life would grow harsher, comfort always one step removed, rest uneasy. The act of mixing, applying, and smoothing plaster is a form of care, subtle, patient, and deeply necessary. As years pass, generations leave their own marks, Different hands, different techniques, slight changes in the color or texture of the plaster. Yet the purpose remains unchanged: to shield the household from the persistent advance of damp and the unwelcome breath of stench, to preserve a small sanctuary of dryness and calm within a restless world. If you listen quietly, you might hear the soft scrape of trowel on stone, the gentle murmur of conversation as family members work together, the muted laughter of children learning a timeless skill. The home is built not only of wood and stone, but of these moments, careful, repeated, unremarkable yet vital. So, as you drift into sleep, picture the subtle glow of a plastered wall in candlelight, the hush of rain outside, and the quiet confidence of those who labored year after year to keep their homes safe and whole. In the rhythm of their maintenance, in the persistent smoothing of lime and sand, find a gentle assurance that comfort often springs not from grandeur or display, but from the steady, humble work of sealing out the damp and containing what is best left unseen. The quiet spreading of kitchen waste into field boundaries. Imagine yourself stepping out into the first gray light of dawn, the chill of morning lingering on your skin as you stand at the edge of a sleeping village. The air is heavy with the scent of wet earth and last night's wood smoke, dew beating on the tangled grass beneath your feet. Beyond the thatched roofs and twisting lanes, a patchwork of fields stretches toward the horizon, their boundaries traced by low, unruly hedgerows. In these early hours, when the rest of the household still slumbers, quiet figures begin their silent work. Servants moving steadily from kitchen door to field's edge, baskets balanced on their hips, their steps measured and unhurried. Within each basket is the detritus of another day's living: potato peelings, wilted greens, eggshells, and the bones left over from the evening stew. There might be a handful of ashes from the hearth or the coarse sweepings from yesterday's bread making. These scraps, carefully collected through the routines of kitchen life, are destined not for the midden within the yard, but for the boundary between the cultivated and the wild, the thick hedge that divides one family's field from another's. This spreading of kitchen waste is a ritual as familiar as any prayer and nearly as vital. In a world where little is wasted, every scrap carries meaning. Waste becomes nourishment for the earth. Peelings and crumbs, spread along the tangled base of the hedge, slowly sink into the soil, feeding worms and beetles, turning decay into new life. Over weeks and months, these offerings enrich the boundaries, encouraging wildflowers and the slow, steady flourishing of hedgerow plants that hold the soil together and shelter birds, bees, and small creatures. The act itself is gentle, almost meditative. Picture a servant pausing at the edge of a field, their breath visible in the cool air, tipping the contents of their basket into the tangle of roots and bramble. The soft thud of peels on earth, the scatter of crumbs, the rustle of the hedge, these sounds are as much a part of the morning as birdsong or the distant crowing of a rooster. With practiced care, the servant spreads the scraps in a thin line, mindful not to let piles grow too high, not to leave signs that might invite scolding or suspicion. For while this custom is widely known and quietly accepted, it is not without its quiet tensions. The field boundary, after all, is a line both visible and invisible, a place where the needs of neighbors meet, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in friction. Each family, hoping to keep their own land sweet and well-tended, is careful to spread their kitchen waste on their side of the hedge. Yet the lines can blur. On misty mornings or in the hush before sunrise, it is easy for a handful of scraps to cross the unseen border, whether by accident or silent intent. Sometimes, small arguments spark over such things. Neighbors may grumble that the peelings from another's table seem to appear too often beneath their own hawthorn, or that a certain field has become especially rich in wild nettles and goosegrass, plants that thrive on the hidden generosity or carelessness of others. These disputes are rarely loud, but linger in quiet comments at the market or a glance exchanged on the church steps. Still, most families know that what the land takes, it often gives back. The richness of one season may even out in the next. Over time, the kitchen waste becomes invisible, drawn down into the dark by worms and rain, transformed by slow, patient chemistry into the humus that gives soil its sweetness. The hedgerows, so often taken for granted, flourish with this steady nourishment. Their roots dig deep, their branches knit together, offering fruit and shelter and a living fence that keeps animals in and winds at bay. For the servants, this dawn ritual is just one task among many, a quiet labor that rarely draws attention or praise. The boundaries themselves are alive with other quiet stories. Birds pick through the peelings for seeds and grubs. Hedgehogs and mice dart beneath the brambles, finding warmth where the scraps are thickest. The wildflowers that bloom along these borders, primrose, cow parsley, violets, owe much to the fertility carried each morning in a humble basket. And so, the division between field and hedge, between home and wild, becomes a place of subtle exchange. Food for the land, nourishment for the creatures, quiet cooperation and occasional contention among neighbors. When disputes arise, they are handled with the same discretion as the act itself. A quiet word at the gate, or a gentle reminder, is usually enough. Sometimes, families take turns maintaining the boundaries, trimming the hedge, pulling nettles, or sharing the compost that gathers along the base. In years of hardship, when the soil is thin or the crops poor, these rituals of sharing and dispute become even more important, binding the village together with bonds of necessity, memory, and compromise. As the sun rises and the day's other labors begin, the field boundaries grow quiet again. The baskets are emptied, the servants return to kitchens now warm with the scent of baking bread and brewing tea. The evidence of the morning's work fades quickly, drawn into the living tapestry of the land. Yet, the rhythm of this daily act remains, a quiet thread woven through the year, a reminder that survival is built on patience, repetition, and the unseen alchemy of waste returned to earth. So as you drift into rest, imagine the early hush of the fields, the gentle thud of scraps on soil, the slow, steady growth of hedges made fertile by countless small offerings. In every age, it is these humble, persistent acts, often unnoticed, sometimes disputed, always essential, that sustain the land and the people who call it home. Each boundary, quietly tended, tells the story of lives lived in balance with the world, of waste transformed into plenty, and of the delicate, enduring ties that hold a community together, dawn after dawn. The practice of draining tallow and grease into special sumps. Imagine yourself in a small village or crowded town centuries ago, as evening settles gently over rooftops and the last light of day slips through narrow lanes. Behind each window, a quiet industry continues, the soft clatter of bowls and the faint sizzle of cooking fires drifting through the air. In every home, meals are prepared with simple ingredients, coarse bread, root vegetables, and, whenever fortune allows, a little meat or fat to flavor the stew. But even as food brings comfort, it leaves behind something both valuable and troublesome: tallow and kitchen grease. Day after day, scraps of fat and drops of oil accumulate in the pans and pots of every kitchen. Unlike today, where drains and bins can make such residues disappear, households in ages past developed careful habits for collecting and managing every trace of grease. The rhythm of their lives was shaped by quiet acts of thrift and superstition, by the ongoing need to use or dispose of every leftover with care. In the back corners of kitchens, you might find a special vessel set aside, a battered jar, a wooden pail, sometimes just a chipped bowl, where drippings and tallow are poured and left to cool. The air grows heavy with the scent of cooking, underlain by the deeper, almost earthy aroma of accumulated grease. Sometimes the fat is skimmed from soups, sometimes scraped from roasting pans, always handled with a mix of practicality and caution. Periodically, these vessels are emptied, their contents destined for a place even more hidden from daily view. Outside, beyond the back step or tucked beneath the edge of a shed, families dig special sumps, shallow pits lined with stones or rough boards, dug for the sole purpose of collecting grease and kitchen tallow. These sumps are kept apart from the midden or other waste heaps, both for reasons of usefulness and, for some, deep-seated belief. For in many places, it is quietly understood that to keep grease too close to the hearth invites misfortune, souring luck, and perhaps drawing the wrong kind of attention. The rhythm of the month is marked by these small rituals. On quiet mornings or in the hush after supper, someone carries the cooled grease outdoors, carefully tipping the congealed mass into the pit. The sound is muted, a soft thud and then silence as the fat settles among older layers. Over time, the sumps fill, the layers mingling, their textures and scents changing as they are touched by air, earth, and slow decay. Not all grease is simply discarded. In some households it is gathered for barter or sale. Local chandlers, whose livelihood depends on steady supplies of tallow, may purchase kitchen fat to render into candles, humble tapers that will one day burn in these same homes. The practice becomes another thread in the web of village economy, a quiet exchange that passes almost unnoticed but supports many. Others, wary of misfortune, prefer to bury their grease deep and unseen, perhaps marking the spot with a stone or a bit of old wood. These acts are never spoken of directly, yet their meaning is shared in a glance or a nod between neighbors. Old stories linger, warning of ill luck or strange happenings when fat is left where it should not be, or when sumps are left untended for too long. There is a sense, not quite named, that the invisible currents of fate move through even the most practical tasks. You can imagine the landscape of the household, the warmth of the kitchen, the sharp, savory scent of tallow, the cool dampness of earth around the pit outside. There is a quiet pride in the careful management of waste, a sense of order maintained against the slow encroachment of disorder. Each month, as the vessels are emptied and the sumps tended, the rhythm of daily life is reaffirmed. Over years, these practices leave their traces beneath the soil, thin layers of old grease, the faint outline of long-vanished pits, the memory of careful hands working by lamplight. Archaeologists, digging centuries later, may uncover these hidden sumps, their contents telling stories of thrift, economy, and belief. They reveal the gentle persistence of ordinary people, finding ways to use, manage, or hide the things that linger after the meal is done. As dusk deepens and the household settles to rest, you might picture the empty kitchen, the stillness of the courtyard, and the quiet secret kept beneath the ground. The world outside sleeps, but beneath the earth, the slow work of transformation continues. Grease returning to soil, old luck finally set at ease. In these small, repeated acts, families found not just practicality, but a gentle comfort, that the messes of daily life could be managed with care, and that, even in the humblest rituals, there is a kind of peace. So as you drift into thought, imagine the silent tending of those sumps, the careful pouring, the steady hands, the quiet confidence that with each act, the household is set right for another day. The rhythm of their lives continues, softly, beneath the surface, marked by the gentle wisdom of knowing when to keep, when to sell, and when to let go. The belief that rain would wash away all human traces in time. Imagine a village caught in the pause before a summer storm. The air hangs heavy, dense with the promise of rain, the sky pressed low and gray above tiled rooftops. Windows stand half open, and those who pass along the cobbled lanes move more quickly than usual, glancing up at the deepening clouds. Every household has learned to recognize the subtle signals, the sharp scent of ozone, the restless swaying of trees, the hush that settles over fields and gardens. Rain is coming, as it has come for generations, not simply as inconvenience or blessing, but as a force with the power to change everything, if only for a little while. When the first drops spatter on stone, there is a moment of quiet anticipation. Shutters, closed tight against dust or sun, are flung wide in dozens of homes, the creak of wood echoing softly up and down the street. Some families hurry to pull bread from the oven or gather clothes from the hedges. Others pause to watch the world darken and shimmer, remembering stories passed down like folk songs. The belief that the rain carries away more than just the dust of daily living, that it can, in its own patient way, wash away the memory of every human trace. You can picture the rhythm. Water slides down the worn faces of buildings, tracing centuries-old grooves and washing the stones clean. Gutters and shallow trenches, so often dry, are suddenly alive with flowing streams. The air changes, growing cool and sharp, filled with the sound of rain on slate and the low, steady hush of water moving through alleyways. In kitchens and workshops, windows are propped wide, letting in the clean scent of storm. Those inside listen, comforted by the sense that something old and tired is being swept away. It is a belief as practical as it is poetic. After rain, the streets gleam, their surfaces made new, the footprints of animals and people faded into nothing. Children run out barefoot as soon as the worst has passed, splashing through puddles that reflect a sky scraped clean of dust. The baker sweeps out his shop, marveling at how the flagstones seem brighter, how the smell of yeast and flour rides more easily on the freshened air. Gardeners step into the mud to check their beans, grateful for a world that feels, if only for a day, somehow unburdened. Over time, these small rituals take on the weight of tradition. Some say the rain carries away not just dirt, but memory itself, sorrows, old arguments, secret shames. If a quarrel has lingered in a house, or misfortune cast a shadow over a doorstep, the coming of rain is an invitation to begin again. Buckets and brooms are left in the corners, doors are thrown open to the wind, and water is allowed to flow unimpeded from the high ground to the lowest lane. Even the narrowest alleys, usually shadowed and still, shine briefly, as if the world is reminding its inhabitants that all things, good and ill, are temporary, subject to the gentle erosion of time and weather. The stories multiply as seasons turn. Elders recall summers when rain fell for days, and by the time the sun returned, it seemed every trouble had been softened or swept away. Parents teach their children to set worries aside when thunder rumbles, to let go of regret or worry as easily as the rain runs down the gutter. The youngest invent games to see who can catch the cleanest drop, as if it holds some special power to renew. And so, the village's memory is shaped as much by absence as by accumulation. After a storm, the streets bear no sign of yesterday's market, of spilled grain or muddy footprints, of laughter or quarrel. The stones are blank, ready to be written on again by the day's new stories. Even the smells change. Where once there was dust or smoke, now only the sweet, almost metallic tang of rainwater lingers. Among the wealthy, rituals differ little. Grand homes with inner courtyards and broad flagstones welcome the rain, letting it sluice the memory of feasts and footsteps into hidden drains. Servants are set to mop up what remains, but always, for a little while, there is a sense that even the most powerful must yield to the cleansing, indifferent work of nature. Rain levels all things, sweeping memory and status alike into the soft, receptive earth. Archaeologists and historians rarely find a record of this belief, for it is not written in laws or ledgers but passed from mouth to ear, hidden in habits and the care of homes. Still, they sometimes notice the patterns: a worn threshold set to catch the flow of water, an old stone step smoothed by centuries of rain, a proverb tucked between the lines of a letter. All traces are washed away, if only for a day. If you imagine yourself standing at the open door, the storm spent and the world rinsed bright and strange, you may sense the comfort this belief offered. To know that every sorrow, every stain, every misstep might be softened by the coming of rain is to find hope not in the grandeur of history, but in its gentle forgetting. The rhythm of life, renewed each time the clouds gather, becomes easier to bear. As the village dries and the world resumes its slow, steady work, the memory of the rain lingers. A promise that nothing lasts forever, that time and water together will always make room for something new. And so, with shutters open, streets shining, and hearts a little lighter, the belief endures that rain, for a moment, can wash away all human traces, leaving the stones and the people who walk them ready to begin again. The unspoken rules for sharing the town's single refuse heap. Imagine the slow arrival of morning in a small medieval town. The streets, still quiet from the hush of night, echo with the first cautious footsteps of early risers. A baker heading toward his oven, a child carrying water, a stray dog moving with purposeful curiosity. Beyond the cluster of houses, not far from the edge of tilled fields and foot-worn paths, stands a mound, a midden, the town's single refuse heap. It rises with a gentle slope, marked not by fences or signposts but by years of habit and the quiet choreography of its users. In every era before modern sanitation, the midden was a fixture of daily life. It was not beautiful, nor did anyone wish to linger there. Yet, as the common destination for all that was broken, spent, or unwanted, it quietly reflected the rhythm of the town itself. Scraps of food, cracked pots, worn-out shoes, raked-up leaves, the ash from last night's fire, all found their way here, bundled in baskets or wrapped in old cloth, deposited by hands young and old. Some items decayed into rich earth, others marked the passage of seasons with a stubborn refusal to disappear. What is most striking, if you watch the townspeople at the midden, is not disorder, but a curious, silent order. An etiquette without instruction, a pattern without enforcement. No official lines are drawn, no overseer stands watch, and yet everyone seems to know their place. A newcomer might pause at the edge, basket in hand, uncertain where to step. With time, gentle observation reveals the system, an unspoken understanding maintained as much by glances as by memory. Households tend to use the same portion of the heap, generation after generation. One family might approach from the west, another from the road near the well, each tipping their share onto a familiar patch. This custom ensures that space remains for others, that no one pile grows too high, and that each household's refuse is quietly mingled with the rest. Even among children sent to do the chore, a whispered caution passes from older to younger. Don't scatter your peelings across the path, don't tip ashes on the place for kitchen scraps, and always leave the spot tidy for the next. The reasons for this etiquette are as old as the town itself. Without a shared sense of order, the heap would soon sprawl into paths and gardens, inviting quarrels and confusion. With it, the midden remains manageable, its boundaries respected, its nuisance contained. When the wind is right, or the rains have been heavy, the smell may carry, but complaints are rare. Everyone understands that the midden is a necessity, a burden best borne together, and that peace depends on small, daily courtesies. There are other, subtler rules too. If a family is known to be struggling, a lost harvest, a sick child, the town may quietly tolerate their messier contributions, letting a little disorder pass without comment. If someone forgets and leaves a basket behind, it is often set neatly aside, never stolen, sometimes returned to a doorstep with nothing more than a nod between neighbors. In this way, the heap is both communal and personal, a shared space for what no one wants, but also a gentle marker of each family's place in the web of village life. From time to time, an outsider, a merchant passing through, a visitor from a distant hamlet, may ask about the lack of rules, or marvel at the absence of quarrels over such a potentially contentious space. The townsfolk only shrug. To them, the etiquette is as natural as breathing, a product of habit rather than decree. Even disputes, when they arise, are resolved with quiet words and careful gestures, a rebalancing of custom that allows the system to continue, mostly unchanged. Children, of course, are the first to test the boundaries. In idle moments, they may dig in the heap for treasures, broken beads, bent spoons, the occasional lost coin. There is gentle teasing, a little boasting, but rarely does mischief cross the invisible lines of etiquette. Elders watch from a distance, offering correction more often by example than by scold. In this way, each new generation learns the rhythms of the heap, folding themselves into the town's long memory. As seasons turn, the midden grows and shrinks in rhythm with the life around it. In spring, there are trimmings from gardens and eggshells in abundance. In autumn, piles of husks, corn stalks, and the remains of the harvest add their texture. After a festival, perhaps a little extra color, a splash of wax, a faded ribbon. These details, noted by few, become the subtle calendar by which the heap marks time. When the heap grows too high or encroaches on the path, the town may gather in quiet cooperation. Shovels are brought, carts assembled, and for a brief hour, the work becomes communal and almost festive. Children chase each other with sticks, the elderly offer advice, and for a moment, the mound becomes not just refuse, but a site of gentle togetherness. By midday, the order is restored, the lines and boundaries gently refreshed, the choreography resumed. For travelers or those who have left for distant towns, the memory of the midden lingers. A scent on the wind, a patch of earth trodden by countless feet, a small example of how life is quietly shaped by the need to share and the willingness to do so in peace. No records are kept of these unspoken rules, no histories written, yet they endure, passed on as softly and steadily as the dawn. So as you drift toward sleep, imagine the slow movement of people along the path to the midden, the careful step, the pause to observe, the silent recognition of custom. Picture the gentle choreography that maintains order where none appears, the comfort found in repetition, and the quiet dignity in even the humblest routines. In this way, the town's single refuse heap is not only a site of disposal, but a testament to the power of shared, unspoken understanding, woven deep into the daily life of a community and gently held by every hand that tips its share. The habit of placing fragrant herbs along gutter channels. Imagine yourself in a medieval village, the morning sun just beginning to lift the veil of mist from the sloping rooftops. The cobbled lanes glisten faintly from the night's dew, and beneath the quiet surface of village life, the daily dance of maintenance and ritual begins anew. The first sound is often the gentle trickle of water, weaving through narrow gutters that skirt the eaves of every home, winding down to the heart of the settlement. It is here, in these small and seldom noticed channels, that a delicate custom unfolds, a practice as much about hope as it is about hygiene. The homes of this world are built with practicality in mind. Thick stone walls, thatched or tiled roofs, and, for those fortunate enough, carefully carved wooden gutters to guide the constant threat of rain away from foundations and hearths. The gutters, however, are not simply conduits for rainwater. As seasons turn, they carry more: fragments of leaf and twig, the sweepings of the yard, and at times, less pleasant remnants, kitchen slops, soiled water, even waste that must be ushered quietly out of sight and mind. The system is efficient in its way, but it is not immune to the scents and stains of village living. To soften these realities, households embrace a gentle ritual. Bundles of fragrant herbs, lavender, thyme, rosemary, are gathered from gardens and wild verges, their stems tied together with bits of twine or a strip of old linen. These are not grand bouquets meant for show, but modest gatherings: handfuls of woody rosemary, a sprig or two of thyme, the pale, purple heads of lavender, brushed clean and set aside for a practical purpose. Imagine the early morning, cool and quiet, as a householder steps outside, a bundle of herbs in hand. The air carries the sharp sweetness of crushed lavender, the earthier, resinous note of rosemary, the gentle warmth of thyme. With slow, practiced movements, the householder tucks the herbs along the gutter's edge, sometimes pressing them beneath the wooden lip, sometimes letting them rest in small, aromatic clusters. The herbs are positioned not only at the mouth of the gutter, where water first tumbles down, but also along the run itself, where currents, hidden from view, carry their silent burdens away from the home. The effect is, at first, fleeting. When rain falls or when water is poured from the kitchen, it rushes along the gutter, briefly releasing the hidden perfume of the herbs. For a moment, the air near the house is touched with a sweetness, a clean and hopeful counterpoint to what might otherwise have been an unpleasant tide. The fragrance is subtle but persistent, never overwhelming, just enough to create the illusion of freshness, to mask for a few minutes the ordinary odors of waste and damp that might otherwise cling to the stones and beams. This ritual of laying herbs is as much symbolic as it is practical. The herbs, hardy and forgiving, thrive in window boxes and the corners of gardens, brought in when needed, used for seasoning food, for simple remedies, and, as here, for maintaining the boundaries of comfort. Each time a householder places a bundle, it is an act of quiet resistance against decay, against discomfort, against the slow, creeping advance of unpleasantness. It is also an offering, in a sense, a gift to the household, to neighbors, even to the spirits believed by some to linger in threshold and eaves. Children grow up learning this custom, gathering herbs alongside elders, binding them together, and tucking them in gutters after a heavy rain. Sometimes, the task becomes a moment of shared quiet, a chance to notice the blue sky reflected in a puddle, the scent of fresh leaves mingling with that of damp earth. The repetition of the gesture, week after week, season after season, weaves it into the rhythm of daily life. The presence of fragrant herbs along the gutters brings small comfort, even if it does not erase the underlying reality. In times of celebration, more herbs might be added, windowsills blooming with green, gutters lined with sprigs that catch the sun and the admiration of those passing by. At other times, a single faded bundle persists, its scent nearly gone, a gentle reminder of the effort to bring sweetness to the everyday. The custom reflects a broader theme that shapes so much of village life: the art of making do, of meeting necessity with quiet ingenuity. There is little waste, herbs too coarse or old for cooking still find a use along the gutter, their last gift a faint cloud of fragrance after the rain. As seasons change and the gardens sleep beneath frost or wither in the heat, new bundles are gathered, dried, and saved, always ready for the next occasion. In this way, even the unseen parts of the household, the gutters, the shadowy channels that carry water and waste, are given care. The act of tending to these spaces, of layering comfort atop necessity, brings its own quiet dignity. The gutters may carry the hidden currents of daily living, but above them, the scent of lavender or thyme proclaims a momentary triumph, a persistent hope that beauty and order can be found even where one least expects. As you drift into sleep, imagine the hush of the village as dusk settles, the faint aroma of herbs lingering in the air, rain tapping gently against the rooftops. Picture the careful hands that placed each bundle, the rhythm of care and adaptation that shaped lives in a world where small comforts mattered. The habit of laying fragrant herbs along gutter channels was never just about masking a scent. It was a daily assertion that, even amid the messiness of survival, there was always space for a touch of sweetness, a breath of hope, and the subtle, enduring artistry of ordinary life.